Andrew, it's great to have you on the podcast. We had a chance to meet when I was fishing with Bob Kopras. He hired me or bought me in an auction for BTT to come fish with me. He said, no, what? I don't want to fish with you. You come fish with me and my guide, which was you, obviously.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many days we fished together now, but you are one of the most remarkable guides I've ever fished with.
Thanks.
You know, the way your demeanor, your work ethics, your sight is unbelievable. You find fish, but you're cool.
Well, I do it every day, so there's no reason to try to show that something that I'm not.
Who'd you learn from, the dynamics of being a guide and being a fisherman, or just your personality on a boat?
Well, that's just my personality, but learning fishing was from my father, no question, and my uncle. I had an uncle that was a guide here on Marco, so I spent a lot of time growing up with him, but my father took me fishing every chance we got, either fishing or hunting.
And your roots are very deep over here from the 1800s. Tell me about that.
Yeah, his family moved here in the late 1800s. My dad was born in 1935, grew up here on Marco, and ended up, both his parents had died the time he was 11, so he was in Fort Myers, which is where I grew up ultimately. But he spent a lot of time here on Marco because of family members, so I did also.
And your father was very involved with fisheries management.
He was, yeah. He was fortunate. He was in the road construction business. He was an accountant by profession, but he basically retired when he was 45, pretty young, and did a lot of other stuff because he had investments. He could retire and do a lot of fisheries management. He and Alex Jernigan started FCA in Florida, which is now CCA. So they're big conservationists. He was one of the founding members of BTT. So he's been really involved in a lot of this stuff.
It's nice to have, Nikki and I, obviously, I've been a fisherman, not necessarily a hunter my whole life, but it was so easy for him to get involved because he had that interest. And you had that interest. I've got 2 other sons, and they're completely uninterested with fishing. So luckily, I got at least 1 out of 3 that connected, with all this.
Yeah. Well, I was a big pain in the ass growing up. I was dyslexic. I was hyperactive. My mother didn't want me around. Take that kid fishing. No, she loved me, but I was a handful, I guess. So.
Were you a rebel?
No, not so much. I was just a typical kid that was hyperactive and aggravating, I suppose. And she's like, take him.
From a young age, was your mindset always to be a fishing guide?
Not necessarily. Even as an adult, when I grew up, I went to college. I hated school. I couldn't stand going to school. All the way through, even into college, I didn't want to be there. But I didn't want to be a disappointment to my parents. I wanted to have a good job and be productive. And for some stupid reason, I didn't think being a fishing guide was necessarily something to be proud of necessarily, which I obviously was mistaken. I think it's a great job. But I made it almost all the way through college. I had about 3 classes left to graduate, and I just decided I'd had enough and quit, started selling real estate a little bit part-time and guiding. And probably doing 100 days a year while I was selling real estate. And decided after 5 years that I loved the job. It was a good living, great people. You get to not work while you're working.
Right.
So it worked out well for me. I've created a great business. I've been doing it 34 years now, and love going to work every day still.
Right. But you had a great run on the Redfish Tour. I mean, you banked some good money on that tour.
We did well. I was guiding almost 300 days a year then. I was really fishing a lot, and I've fished a couple of the IGFA series tournaments and thought, hey, this is really cool. So I thought, well, if I could cut back and fish 200 days a year and go do this 100 days a year, it might be a great way of having a lifestyle. And it was for about almost 10 years we did that, and very fortunate. We did well. We worked hard at it, but we did really well at it.
So you were, I think, 4 to 5 times grand champion?
Yeah, we won
for the year?
Probably 4 or 5 times. Won championship, I think 2 or 3 times. Team of the year 3 times. We did pretty well with it.
And what's the average price money? You're talking if you win one of those tournaments.
It changed. Like for a regular event, it was like $35,000-$40,000. A championship, I think, was probably $75,000.
Wow.
The trick was to have sponsors and have bonus money in your sponsorship. So if you won a $75,000 tournament, you could get another $75,000 in bonus money.
And you were saying early on in those tournaments, there were about 110 boats. And
Yeah.
they cut back to 40 and 50.
Later in the season, yeah, it dropped back to a smaller number. They were looking at making TV shows for ESPN more than anything. So it made it a lot nicer with smaller fields. You got to know everybody, and the pressure on the fishery wasn't near as bad. And the local people, they hated it when 110 boats showed up. They pounded the crap out of all their fish. So with smaller fields, you were a little more invited at least.
So tell me about your mindset. Like you would go into North Carolina or Texas in a place that you've never fished before. What was your mindset going in, and how many pre-fish days would you fish?
We typically pre-fished a week. You could do research up to a couple weeks out, then you couldn't really talk to anybody. But you'd look at the time of year, what fish should be doing. Okay, it's summertime, they should be out on the flats, or it's wintertime, it's cold. Fish are probably going to be in channels or potholes or whatnot. And you just start looking for those areas, and sometimes you draw blanks, so you look at other areas. So you just keep looking at different scenarios, different areas, till you find a pattern. Once you find a pattern, you try to replicate that pattern.
Now, would you look at maps, or how would you understand where to try to fish estuaries and wherever you were going to go? I mean, Google Earth was not available.
It was not available then. No, there was a company called Standard Map, and he had aerials. So we could buy standard mapping if they were available in that area, and we'd study those different places off those maps.
And what would you look for? What would stand out when you looked at a map and you'd think, okay, this looks like a good spot?
Just depending on where you were, what time of year it was, what scenario. Like, are you going to fish in Louisiana? Okay, are the fish in the ponds? Are they on the outside edges? Are you looking flowing water or stagnant water? Every area had its own personalities. Like Louisiana, everybody's going to have 27-inch fish, which was our upper fish. We had to have 2 fish a day, 27-inch max. 90% of the field's going to have that. You got to figure out where the fat fish are there.
Short, fat ones, because it's a weight fish tournament, right?
Exactly.
And numbers didn't really mean a whole lot. You were limited to how many fish a day?
Exactly. You had 2 fish a day.
Only 2.
For 2 days, and the top 5 teams fished the third day. So if you're in Fort Myers, or Florida, I should say, you better have close to 27-inch fish. You're not necessarily, everybody's going to have that by any stretch. So you were just trying to get the biggest fish you could in Florida. Just depending on the area you're in.
So you go to Louisiana or Venice and you catch a 45-pound monster redfish, it's
worthless.
Worthless.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't even look in those places. And we kind of specialize in sight fishing. We really focused as much as we could on poling and sight fishing. A lot of boats ran bay boats and they blind casted. Some boats fished jetties or deeper jigs and whatnot. We could see the fish, and we wouldn't even cast a lot of fish just because we knew it was too small, too big. Don't even mess with them.
What was your biggest run in one of those tournaments?
What do you mean? Oh, distance-wise?
Distance-wise.
Oh, we won a tournament from Pensacola to Panama City. It's 105 miles. So we did that 3 days in a row.
So it's 210 miles a day.
Yeah. Yeah, that
back and
was
forth.
good. There's guys doing a lot more than that, though. We did an Orange Beach to Louisiana one trip. The first day was slick calm, no problem. Got over there, caught 80 fish. Went back. Second day, a front went through, and it was horrible. We ripped the console loose from the boat, beat the trolling motor off it, broke the boat pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad.
How's your body feel after all that run?
Horrible.
Your back is the worst?
My back would really get hurt. And just you'd get stiff from inflammation.
Right.
I found a little inflammation pill called Mobic or meloxicam that I would take occasionally. That would loosen you up a little bit, but it's tough. It was hard on you.
I think you told me one time that you guys were transporting ladders.
Yeah,
Tell me about that.
I shouldn't say we started the ladder because we'd seen a team occasionally do it, but nobody was doing it regularly. So my partner got this idea that we needed to be able to see better because we were sight fished. So we pulled into a Lowe's. He walked in to buy a 6-foot ladder and came out with an 8-foot ladder. because that's what they had. And we strapped it to the front. And I think the first 2 tournaments we fished with ladder, we won. We top 5'd every tournament that year off the ladder. So everybody had ladders after that.
One of you guys would have to hold the ladder at the bottom to stabilize it, and the other guy was on top fishing?
We tried to tie it down best we could. We had spring cleats up front, and we tie it on each side. And I think Mark fell off at one time was all.
What kind of a hit was that?
He actually was coming down. He had a fish on and was coming down the ladder and jumped once he knew he was falling. So
he saved it.
But they showed that on ESPN about 800 times. Of course, so it's good.
So you came up with the ladder system, and then everyone shortly.
Yeah, like I say, there was a couple guys that done it once or twice over several years. But yeah, after that we did. Now, at the second year, they outlawed them. You weren't allowed to have them. It had to be affixed to the deck. So that's when the towers started coming, these big high towers in the front of boats now that you see today. They're all welded and fold down when they're trailer and whatnot. And
for the most part, your mindset going into these tournaments, everyone would run big runs, but I heard that you like to stay close by to fish longer.
Early on, that was definitely the case. Later, we started stretching it out a little bit, but early on, there's plenty of fish close by we found, and we did really well doing that. So
you guys dominated.
Some years.
You won 4 to 5 years out of a 10-year span.
Yeah, we did pretty well. I think team of year 3 times. So we did well.
I think you also told me your teammate had unbelievable eyes.
He did. Mark Sepe. He didn't grow up fishing like a lot of us did, but he was just a natural athlete, and he picked up things. He had incredible eyes. I have pretty good eyes, and he would see fish long before I did very often.
That's crazy. I remember fishing with you one day. You said to Bob and I, okay, I got to fish at 10 o'clock. I'm going to pole towards him. You tell me when you see him. I think you pulled for 15 minutes, and finally I saw him 10 feet from the boat.
Yeah. It just different scenarios, but Mark had great eyes. He did really well with that. So that we made a good team. I was used to poling because I pole every day. So I could pole a lot, and he'd be on the bow a lot of times, or vice versa, but he could see him.
What kind of boats were you running back then?
We were sponsored by Maverick. So we had either 21 Redfisher or 21 Maverick, and then we had whatever their poling skiff was, typically their tunnel. So we fished out both of them. We fished out of the tunnel probably more than the bigger boat, though.
That's probably a pretty hard run with the flat bottom boat.
Yeah, for long runs. Like that big long run we fished out of, I think we had a Pathfinder that year, a 22 Pathfinder.
Do you still love redfish as much as you used to?
Yeah, no, I enjoy catching them. I still spend about a month in Louisiana every year.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I go out there and stay in a friend's house at Venice.
You guide over there?
I do, yeah.
So now you're looking for the big ones.
Yeah. We do a lot of the big ones. I've liked fishing the marsh still. So stipe fish is my favorite. So we do some of the big ones and get that out of the way. This year, the big ones were in the marsh, and it was great. We caught a lot of big fish right up in the marsh till the hurricane came.
Right. So you're over there before the hurricane.
Yeah, I typically go. Most of the guys go when the water's much cleaner and the bigger fish push in the marsh, which is October, November, December.
Right.
I usually go in August. There's hardly anybody there. And
nice.
It's kind of pleasant. You don't have the clean water necessarily, but I'm used to pretty dirty water in this part of the world, so we can make do.
Right.
So before the podcast, you were talking about how the tournaments would regulate cheating. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, the easiest way was a polygraph that we had to take. If you were leading the first day, you had to take polygraph mandatory. Then they would randomly select a couple other teams, and sometimes you could influence their randomly selecting if you had some suspicions on people. But they relied on us to watch each other too, and nobody wants somebody cheating against them.
Was there a lot of cheating going on?
I don't think a lot. No, I think the biggest cheating that was going on was maybe getting local information inside the window that you weren't allowed to.
That's interesting. Why was that banned where you couldn't speak to anybody inside those 2 weeks?
I guess they didn't want somebody coming in talking to local guides and whatnot that were fishing every day.
Telling that one team it's hot over here or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you regularly figured whoever was from that area was going to win the tournament. And logically speaking, that would be, and rarely those guys won. It was usually somebody from outside the area that you get so used to looking in your spots and not outside the window, so to speak, that the local guys didn't always win the tournament by any stretch.
What made you guys better than everybody else?
I don't know that
So
we were better than
consistently.
anybody else, but
Well, you
we
won
were
more.
Yeah, we were persistent. We worked hard at it. I mean, we fished long pre-fish hours. Several years I had another team, Rick Murphy and his partner, that we shared information. So we'd split up and we'd have 4 boats on the water out looking. So a lot of teams would, them and their partner would be out looking. So that was 1 boat an hour on the water. So we worked hard. We really worked hard at it like it was a job.
How'd you get into the tournaments, redfish tournaments? Because you're a guide over here at Marco Island, probably having a good time catching a bunch of snook and redfish and tarpon, and all of a sudden you thought, let's go to Redfish Tour.
I've had a customer then, I still have him now, John Landry, great guy. He wanted to fish a couple of these old local IFA tournaments, which are kind of regional tournaments. And we fished them and did well. And I thought, man, this is really cool. This is fun. There were some other teams I got to be friends with, and I decided I was going to see if I could make it work. So it worked out real well, and John fished some of the events with me. That's basically where it started and snowballed from there.
Right.
When did you feel like, I'm kind of over these tournaments, I want to go back to my normal program at Marco Island?
Yeah, there was a couple things that happened. We actually witnessed a team cheating and protested them, and they didn't disqualify them. They just fined them. They ultimately ended up winning the tournament.
They gave them the money anyway.
Yeah, so they won $75,000 and got fined $5,000. And so that was a little disappointing. That kind of soured it for me. I was getting kind of tired of it. My kids were getting older. I've got 3 children. My last one was a senior in high school, and I thought, I need to spend more time at home.
Right.
So I was getting close anyway. That worked out.
Well,
Ultimately, ESPN ended just coincidentally that same time frame. Had nothing to do with the other, though.
Right. Well, you've got a 87-pound tarpon in your back bedroom?
Yeah.
Tell me about that big fish. Oh, my God.
That's a funny story. It was a customer I'd never fished before. I never caught tarpon before, of course. It's all just the guy that catches that one. And he caught about a 140 maybe an hour before that on 20 pounds plug rod. And then he caught that fish. Yeah, about a 2-hour battle. Probably longer it needed to be. He didn't even know how to fight a fish. And we landed the fish. That was back in the, I'd have to go back and look, 2000 range, so 20-something years ago. So we lip gas fish back then, and we hauled him up on the deck for a few pictures and length girthed him and released him.
What were those numbers?
I don't remember. 52-inch girth, I do remember that. The length, somewhere in the mid-90s.
Wow.
98s.
And you guesstimated it to be around 287?
On the length girth, yeah. Yeah. It was a big one.
How often do you see real big fish over here?
We get big fish, early fish, or like our February fish are usually bigger, January fish. That's when I catch all the really biggest fish. When the real migration starts and a lot of fish start coming in, that mixes them up a lot more, I think.
Right. What did your dad, what do you remember the early years fishing over here? But you were in Fort Myers, right?
We were in Fort Myers. We came down to Marco a lot and fished with my uncle because he was a full-time guide, and he just loved fishing like I do. So we come down and fish with him. But Fort Myers and down here, we bait fish mostly. That was just a common way of fishing back then.
Right.
You kept most everything you caught. It was legal. So back then, I think a snook had to be all of 18 inches to keep. Now they're 28, I think, when they're open.
Right.
So, but it was great times. You got to do something other than go to school. You were fishing. It was great.
I asked you if you ever fished Homosassa, and you said that you never had to go up there because fishing right off the coast in Sanibel and just south of Boca Grande was unbelievable. Talk about those days.
Yeah, it was really good. To catch those giant fish was important to some people, and I understand that. It wasn't important to me at that time. I just wanted to catch fish, a lot of fish. And we had a lot of fish then. We had piles of fish. I had a good friend who I grew up with in high school. He's actually 10 years older than I am, but I was around him. He had a little tackle store I built rods in. His name's Phil O'Bannon. And Phil and I started fishing the beach off Sanibel and Captiva all the way up to Boca Grande. There was nobody doing it then, really. I mean, You very rarely ever saw anybody doing it. And we were bait fishing most of it, but we started fly fishing them. There was a lot of fish then. There was nobody bothering them.
And you were pitching crabs to them when you weren't fly fishing, or what were you doing?
Typically not crabs. We were throwing threadfin herring and shiners and pinfish at them. They ate them up, no problem. Then we started fly fishing, old fiberglass fly rods with scientific angler reels, and they ate flies really well too. We had a good time doing that.
Who got you into fly fishing?
Really no one particular person. For some reason, I was doing a ton of fishing. I was probably 15 years old, and there was a neighbor down the street, I guess, who all he did was fish and hunt. He was a realtor, so he had a lot of time when he could do that. And I remember, I guess, now you mentioned it, he was starting to catch a lot of jacks. That's where I really learned how to catch strong fish on light line, because we would catch these 8, 10, 12-pound jacks in the Clusatchie River on 6-pound spin rod. And he started catching them on a fly rod. So I probably started doing it with him a little bit back then.
Tell me about the Boca Grande area. Did you fish up there a fair amount?
Yeah, we fished basically from Boca Grande south, all down the beach. Those early years, they were just giant schools of tarpon would migrate through. I mean, there'd be hundreds of fish in schools, and they were unmolested and stupid.
Right.
So we had a lot of fun, and then the pressure got to be more and more. Then when the river runs through it era came through, everybody in the world started fly fishing, and it got just ridiculous. There were times there'd be 50, 60, 70 boats on the beach fly fishing tarpon, and that ruined it.
Was that early 90s? When was that?
I remember I was in Homesteading in the late 80s, and I was with Tommy Locke up there, and it was just terrible fishing. You'd make one cast every 3 days.
Oh.
And I told Tommy, I said, let's go catch a fish. Let's just go to Boca Grande or wherever we have to go, have a hamburger, and I don't care what we throw. So we ran down to Boca Grande, had a hamburger, bought 12 crabs, and he had some spinning rods, and we went out there, and all of a sudden we found ourselves inside of a whirlpool, a daisy chain of I don't know how many hundreds of fish. And long story short, we had 12 crabs, and we hooked 12 tarpon. I don't know how many we caught.
Yeah.
And then we were up on the beach, and the following morning we had a group of fish that were nice and happy and blooping and rolling around softly, and we'd go in there and we'd start fishing for them, and another boat with a trolling motor would see us and other groups, and they'd just run over and start throwing their crabs or whatever right on top of our flies.
Yeah, that's what it got to be. Before that, it was insane. We'd get these crab hatches. Well, they weren't really hatches. They were going out to spawn. So they come out of the pass by the thousands. And we get up on the south bar of the Boca Grande Pass, and there'd be schools coming out feeding on those crabs. And we did what we call split day then. We go in the morning, daylight till maybe 9:30, then come in the middle of the day and go back out in the afternoon, depending on when the tide was. You'd spend the whole middle part of the day tying flies and leaders, because you would go out in the afternoon and jump 20 plus fish. So then we'd pop them. We weren't unhooking them. We'd just get them on the boat and pop them off, put another fly on. So it wasn't hard to hook a fish. If they were coming out, you put a fly in them, you were going to hook them. Most of the time we had my 21 Maverick, so I put a guy in the front, a guy in the back, and they were doubled up, most schools. It was cool.
What's it like up there now in the hill? I remember doing that with Tommy.
Yeah.
We had a little
100 boats.
100 boats.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. Yeah, we weren't fishing the hill all that much. We were fishing a shallow bar on the outside of the pass.
Right.
And those fish would come out of the pass on the same tide that you're talking about. And it's 2.5, 3 feet, 4 feet of water, clear.
Nice.
Big, 75 fish wads coming out, 50 fish wads.
When you say you weren't fishing the hill, what is that?
The hill is the top end of the pass. And it comes out of that deep water up into shallower water up to maybe 20, 25 feet of water. And those fish all push up there eating those crabs because they want to get to them first. So they just keep pushing up more and more and more. And then somewhere along in that tide, they all drop out to the back end, and they'll get down at the bottom end of the pass feeding on those crabs. And then that is usually the full or dark moon in May or June. A lot of those fish will bunch up and just take off, and you can follow them for miles offshore, and they're going to spawn, and they'll disappear for 3 or 4 days. And sometime in the morning you'll see them coming back, big wads of them coming back in after the spawn.
Was there always a shark problem there, or was that in the later years?
There's always been sharks, no question, but it's far, far worse now. They've trained them. So those fish, I hear stories of guys losing 60, 70, 80% of their fish to sharks now.
I'm surprised the Fish and Game allows that.
Yeah, I don't know what you do about it. You just tell everybody they can't fish anymore there.
Well, you just maybe have some, like a closed area. I mean, if you look at the Keys.
But they're on the beach the same way. They get out on the beach on those schools. Those schools are so big now, those sharks follow the schools. And
so the sharks are not just in the pass.
No, they're outside the pass. They're big, big sharks.
Well, theoretically, they saved, a good part of the population regarding tarpon by banning the coon pops, correct? Or not?
That depends who you're talking to. And I may be ignorant because I really didn't have a dog in the fight, so I wasn't in it all the time. But the coon pop has a big circle hook, and the fish swim in the line, and it pulls up and hooks them in the face somewhere in their cheek or face.
All snags.
Snags, okay, but what's the difference between snagging him inside the mouth and snagging him right here?
It's still a snag, yeah.
It's a snag, but what's the difference to a J-hook, snag him inside the mouth or snagging him here? They pull the same. I don't know how it's killing that fish necessarily. Now, if you're snagging them in other places and pulling them backwards or sideways, I think most of the fish were hooked in the outside cheek. That could be my ignorance because I really wasn't there watching it all the time. Maybe it was worse than I saw. I didn't see that was that big a deal. I think they were just catching a lot more fish.
Right, that's what I mean by that.
They were catching a lot more fish.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Because of it.
There are more fish on the end of a line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just percentage-wise, whether you caught 10 fish today and one got 8, or you caught 40 fish and 4 of them got 8.
Right. It's a numbers thing. I've always wondered why, and they would allow something like that, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Were you ever into record fishing by chance?
I never did a lot of it. That same customer I mentioned earlier, John Landry's son, he was around about the time the junior records were coming out. They were trying to do some promotional stuff, get people involved, I'm sure. And we did some tarpon fishing, caught him some record tarpon.
Is that Josh?
No, his name's John.
Oh, John.
John
that's
Landry.
right.
Yeah. He's a great story. John was one of my earliest customers, and his son was, 6 years old, 7 years old at the time. And he's now 30 and is a guide also. He's guided in Alaska at my recommendation, 11 years. And he's just a fantastic kid and loves fishing. It's really been great mentoring.
Your work ethics are pretty impressive. I mean, you've been doing this, what'd you say, 34 years?
Yep.
And you still, from December until June, you only take 2 days off a month?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. What else would I be doing?
You must what do you like more, money or fishing?
Yes. I never get to spend the money.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's hard to be in the sun all day long. And as a guide, I think it takes a different mindset and a personality to always want to give and be caring for these people to catch fish. It's hard. I know when I have somebody on my boat, it's a friend, I don't even get paid. I can't sleep the night before because I'm so worried about finding fish for these people, you get
used to it. I just like going. I enjoy being there. In fact, if I have the middle of the season, a cancellation, I can't fill, it's like a pretty good chance I'm going to go fishing.
Anyway.
I know that if it's nice weather and the fish are going to be there, I want to go be there.
You want to be in it.
If it's crappy out, maybe not so bad, but
right.
But what if it's not tarpon season? Will you still go out there and plug fish?
If I have a couple days off, yeah. If I'm off 3 or 4 days for some reason.
So you still love it more than ever?
Oh yeah, I love going. I do.
That's awesome.
And I'm lucky, it basically until tarpon season starts, I plug fish. I do snook and redfish and small tarpon, and I got a lot of guys that just fish by themselves, one guy, and they don't care if I stay in the background and trolling motor and plug behind them. So I get to fish a good amount still.
I think Huff does the same.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a pecking order as far as the fish themselves? Like, do you like tarpon the best and then snook and then redfish, or?
Probably I like tarpon the best till the end of the season. I'm over them. But Snook would be a close second, though. I love catching big snook. It's just fun.
Right.
It's a blast. Topwater snook is awesome.
Because it's kind of funny. I used to think that I was such a tarpon guy. And in the beginning, I was a tarpon and a bonefish guy. And then I was a black tip spinner shark guy. You know, it's like I love what's in front of me.
Yeah, I got a buddy that told me one time, and I've never forgotten it. It's all about the bite. Whether it's a crappie or a tarpon, it's all about the bite. You feel
bite.
That thump.
Yeah.
After that, you really doesn't matter.
But after 40 years, well, I started fishing when I was, I think, maybe 7 years old. And I've always loved to fish, but the last 40 years, I've been really invested with the whole tarpon thing and tournaments and whatnot. But I was thinking recently, if I had one last fish to catch, most likely it would be a tailing fish, being a bonefish or a permit, waiting. It's so organic. And I think that's one reason why I kind of like fishing alone. Nobody, even, you know, sure, I love fishing with Nicky. He's my best friend, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so organic, waiting for fish. You know, nobody to talk to. There's no boat. There's just you and the breeze and the fish.
Yeah, I hear you. I take maybe a step back from that. I just like being alone as far as me and my customer or me and my friend. That's the problem with today's world. It's getting more and more crowded and more people. And I've been very fortunate living down here. There haven't been a lot of people. It's hardly anybody now. There's boats around, and you got to work to find places away from them. I remember talking to Steve Huff about people being in your spots. Well, they're not really your spots, but you felt like they were. And I said, you grew up in the Keys. What did you do about people seeing you in places and being there? And I said, it's so infuriating. You want to be there, there's somebody there. And in his words, tough shit. So what do you mean? What are you going to do about it? He said, it'll make you better. You're going to go find a new spot. He's right.
And then it gets so bothersome, he just moved.
Well, that's true.
He finally just left the Keys.
He did.
Are you starting to see that kind of a scenario now in the Everglades area?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's places that, you'd fish, you wouldn't see anybody ever. And now there's some spots that are some of my really favorite tarpon spots, early season spots that you'll get. You might get 2 days, 1 day. It'll be unbelievable still. Next day, there might be 3 boats there.
Oh.
Next day, there might be 8 boats there. How did they figure out? They figured it out just like I did. It's the right time of year. The temperature's right. It's calm. They should be there, I guess. But it's not as much fun. I usually leave. If I get there, there's 3 or 4 boats. I'll go somewhere else.
Right.
It's a big area. If I don't even want to look at them.
You don't want to see the other boats near you.
How often are you finding new spots?
They might not often new, but there's spots that I fished that weren't any good, and now they're better because they've changed. It changes all the time here. And places that last year weren't any good, this year can be really good, and it might not be good for the next 4 years. I don't know if it's current changes or
storms.
Bottom structure. Storms are definitely a big part of it. Pressure, people starting to push them around a little different. So yeah, you find maybe the same shoreline you fished last year, but you fished 400 yards down the way there, and this year they're 400 yards back this way on a different part of them. So they're definitely finding new spots.
Do you, on an average day of guiding, spend a certain amount of time during that day looking at a new spot you've never fished without telling your client?
I used to do that a lot, every day.
Because you gotta find stuff.
Absolutely, it's a big world out there. I don't do it as much as I used to. I might fish down a shoreline, a different part that I hadn't really fished in the last year or so, and look at it.
Right.
And you do find, just like I was talking about, the fish will move to different parts from year to year.
But after 34 years, you know a lot of
you think you know it anyway,
here.
But there's still some areas I could probably. It gets to the point where I really don't want to run another hour.
I was just thinking about that.
That's some of the guys. They don't even stop for an hour and 20 minutes. They run. I got a lot of places I don't have to run near that far. They're still good, but I start seeing boats. It's So, yeah, I just get tired of boat rides. I want to fish.
Right.
But there's times I do those runs, definitely.
Has there been anything new in your repertoire in the last 5 years that was really an eye-opener? Like, oh, my God, this really works well.
Just different lures come out. I fish a lot of Z-Man products. They've got that Elastec material that's fantastic. There's live targets, make some great bait. Excuse me, like great baits. That whole swim bait stuff is really good. Boats are also improving. I fish out of a Maverick, and it's a fantastic little boat. But yeah, their stuff changes all the time.
Right.
So you just went down to this, I think you went down to Bolivia.
I did.
Chased golden dorado.
Yeah, that was fun.
Tell us about that trip.
That was a great trip. I think I mentioned to you earlier, I thought I'd been to the end of the world, but we went another day and a half past there. It was really in the middle of nowhere. Some local indigenous people there that lived, but otherwise I never heard a plane go by in a week. Never saw anybody other than a few of these locals. There's jaguar tracks in the sand everywhere you go.
Wow.
Fishing was phenomenal. They're big golden dorados, up to about 25 pounds we caught. You don't catch a lot of them because they're really fierce. They bite down on the hook so much you don't even get the hook in them when you strip set. But it was cool. It was a lot of fun.
And you were saying to get to these spots, you would take a motorcycle 45 minutes and then a canoe ride 45 minutes and then walk 8 to 12 miles upriver.
You could do that, yeah. You could start right at the camp and start fishing, and it was good down to there. But if you wanted to fish areas, it's like a lot of lodges. They're fished every day for 6 months of the year. So those close by fish get a little bit of pressure. If you're willing to do a little bit of work, you could get away from it. They were really stupid up in those areas. It was not an easy trip. You come home tired every night. But it was fun. It was a great trip.
Was that an American outfit?
Yeah, I know. It's an Argentinian group, Untamed Anglers.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a Pluma River was the river we were on. It was cool. Parrots flying around, monkeys.
That's awesome.
They had a pet ferret they had found as a baby that would run around there and chew on everything he had. He bit the hell out of me one day. Don't worry, he's fine. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Showed my ankle that. He snuck under one of our guys' beds in the middle of the night, crawled up in bed with him, scared the hell out of the poor guy.
Wow.
And you were saying those pacus are pretty difficult to catch. How are you catching them?
Yeah, they eat berries mostly, seeds and berries that fall out of trees. And we caught them on just in Enrico bait fish patterns and running water. If it wasn't running, they could identify it wasn't a berry and they wouldn't eat it. But if you got in turbulent water or something, they would have. But they were like a permit. I mean, they were 100-yard, 150-yard run. They were good fun.
Very cool. Anywhere else you would like to go fishing?
Oh, I like traveling. I enjoy it. I go to the Bahamas every year. Take a group over there. I'm trying to put an Argentina trip, trout fishing together right now. I've been fortunate. I've traveled around a good bit. Argentina before, New Zealand, been Alaska, been kind of all over the place.
In my mind, when you're traveling all these different destinations and airplane rides and hotels and getting stung by mosquitoes and all this sorts of crap, you're thinking in the back of my mind, oh God, I wish I was in this bay in 10,000 Islands right now.
Sometimes, I think more than that, it makes you appreciate what you got. It's awesome seeing new worlds, new fisheries, new everything. But you come home, you think, man, we really got a great fishery here. We really do have a lot of fun. Now, whether it's what I like to do, I don't know, but we do have a really good fishery here.
And you've got a good permit fishery too. Is that?
No, we don't have any permit here.
All right. We won't talk about that then.
No, we've been lucky. We've held up. Unfortunately, we got a lot of people moving to Florida. I guess that's a good and a bad thing. Unfortunately, management is, I think, at best keeping up with it. There's a lot of stuff needs to be done. My father, I mentioned, was one of the starters of CCA. He was there when they made redfish a game fish. Redfish were in bad shape at the time. They came back really well, and they've kind of fluctuate from good to bad. Snook, once again, they've done a lot of things on snook. CCA, I think, has done a great job in trying to conserve. There's a lot of conservation groups out there right now, whether it's Captains for Clean Water or CCA or any of a number one. I think they're all well intended. They all want the same goal. Unfortunately, they tend to infight a little bit. I liken it to football games or teams. You got one you like, he's got one he likes, I got one I like. They all want the same thing. It'd be nice to see them all focus together and maybe have the same target.
What would be the number one thing of your concern that you would like to see changed or fixed or saved?
Well, right now I've got a hot spot for, because of the red tide and whatnot, the areas from us north is closed all the way up to Tampa for harvest of snook and redfish, and they leave us open. Guess what happens? Everybody comes here. So we're getting inundated. I'd like to see if they're going to do something like that, close the whole West Coast, because we're getting undue pressure from all that. So I think that's something they're missing at FWC that they could definitely improve on. Water quality obviously is a change. I'm one of the guys that don't necessarily blame it on the farmers. I think it's just population. There's way more people. There's way more septic tanks. There's way more drainage off roads. And I don't know how we're going to fix that. There's a lot of people smarter than me trying to figure that out, obviously.
You told me about an ad you placed a long time ago when your father was involved with the net bans, et cetera. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, that was the net ban era. We were trying to get rid of all gill nets in Florida, and had a good friend who was married to my cousin who I'd gill netted with. We netted mullet, and so I knew a lot of those guys. A lot of them were my relatives, and I was all for getting rid of the gill nets. So I decided locally I wanted to run a full-page ad in a local paper before the election, and it was pretty expensive. It was going to be $1,500 or something, which was a lot of money to me then. But I was selling real estate at the time. I could get the real estate ad for $400, but I had to put my name on it. So I decided it was worth it, and I put my name on it, and that didn't really fly too well because everybody knew who I was, and that was my relative. Got quite a few bad threats.
What was the worst?
Oh, one of them's kid beat my kid up in high school. They threatened to burn my house, my boat. They did. There was a lot of threats. It wasn't very. One of them pushed my wife against a car at the gas station.
Wow.
Yeah, it got pretty nasty. So we had to get nasty back.
How'd you do that?
We just said what we were willing to do if there was a problem.
You started carrying guns? There's always an influx of commercial and recreation. How do you balance that?
I don't exactly know what you're asking.
Well, you have the commercial people that want to harvest, and you have the recreational people that want to save.
Yeah, there's no question there is a balance there. I don't know. It just, you got to figure out how everybody can make a living, I guess, without screwing the whole world up.
Just limit.
Yeah.
Limit the harvest.
Yep. Yeah, the netting wasn't a horrible thing there. Mostly it was a mullet deal.
Right.
They were trying to get the roe.
It was actually a good thing they banned the nets.
Yeah, and but during the roe season, they targeted schools of mullet, and pretty much all they caught was mullet.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the rest of the year. And truthfully, they might have even been able to close it during the roe season only, or open it in the roe season only and close the rest of the year. Because the rest of the year, they were running nets around the islands.
And catching snook and redfish and everything else, the bycatch.
So it was the rest of the year was the biggest problem. The pompano fishery has come back tremendously since they had the net. There's lots of pompano now. We rarely caught pompano. We catch a few, but not a lot. Now you can go catch a pile of them if you want.
Right. How did this last year or so affect the numbers game with COVID?
Well, you had a lot more people here. Unfortunately, Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale area closed all their ramps.
And Florida was closed. They closed the Keys for all the month of May.
Yeah, but we were open here.
Right.
And everybody in Miami-Dade and Broward County came over here.
How many boats did you see stuck up on the oyster bars?
Yeah, you saw some of that, but there were boats everywhere. We really got overloaded with boats. So it wasn't a good thing for us. We got piled on.
There's a new chip out that shows where to run, wherever you want to run, throughout Florida.
Yep. Yep.
I can see that you dislike that terribly.
I'd like them to outlaw all GPSs. I think it's ruined the offshore fishery. I used to offshore fish a good amount here. We had old Loran A's and C's, and it kind of gets you close to where you had to be, and then you had to work to find it. Lowrance or GPSs came along, and you take you right to the spot, and it wasn't hard to find, and it's really affected the offshore fishery. Anybody can do it now. And the new chip's kind of doing the same thing. Anybody can run the backcountry in the Glades now. They can run through anywhere in Chokoloskee now. It's not hard. You still got to fish. You still got to learn what to look for. But the coming and going used to really eliminate a lot of those people.
But now you have a lot of boats running by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
How technical is the 10,000 Islands in the areas you fish? Like if my father and I were to come down with our watermen and, plug the shorelines and try to, pull the banks and pull the lagoons looking for tarpon and snook, is it very technical?
I mean, you catch fish. Definitely catch fish. There's some little keys that you run in water and points and stuff that you would learn. But you pound enough shorelines, you're going to catch fish, no doubt. But there are certainly areas that you'll learn that are much better and much more technical. Yeah, definitely.
And throughout the winter, how many days are you really sight fishing as opposed to just casting on the shoreline?
There are times I will sight fish. I've got guys that want to do that specifically. I mostly do that if I'm fly fishing. But probably 80% of the time I'm just pounding shorelines, pounding holes, pounding channels, whatever I think those fish are in, depending on what the temperatures are. Winter, it's all about water temperature. So you learn where they're going to be on what temperatures. There'll be nothing on one shoreline on one temperature, but it'll be loaded on another temperature.
Did you ever fish the Keys, or did you ever, have that mindset of, I want to go down there and start guiding the Keys?
No, I never wanted to guide there. I did fish it a good bit. A friend of mine had a house in Big Pine Key in the late 70s, and I went down there a good amount and fished with him, I guess through the middle 80s. And it was good then. It was when all the big bone fish were around, and I got to see big schools of permit back then, and I guess I don't see the tail and permit like they used to now in the big schools like they did. Oh, it was really good then. We caught a lot of fish, and we didn't know what the heck we were doing. We still caught a lot of fish.
And so that's how you know Gordy Hill. You told us a good story about Gordy Hill and his cobia that he caught. I'd like to have you repeat that.
I remember he caught what he thought was going to be a world record at the time, all the way out of the content area. He didn't want to kill it in case it was a record, so he put a rope through it and drug it all the way back to Big Pine Key. Took hours to drag back slowly so it didn't kill it.
So he could weigh it. On his dock.
I don't even know if it was a record. I don't remember the rest of the story. That was impressive enough to hear.
Right.
But no, Gordy's a great guy. I didn't spend a ton of time with him, but a fair amount. And it was a good crew down there. Jose Wahabi, everybody knows, lived 2 or 3 houses down from my buddy's house, so I knew him back then. And got to be buddies with him, and he'd tell us where to go look. So it was a good one to have, telling you where to go peek around and look.
Yeah.
That was a fun crowd. That was good times. But I quit going down there somewhere in the probably late 80s. I was down there, and I grew up where if you were pulling on a flat, that was your flat. Right. And I got up there, and we were fishing. I turned around, there was like 5 other boats pulling in behind us. I was like, I'm done. I don't need to be here.
Yeah, why would you want to leave this spot over here?
Yeah, I don't like being around people a whole lot.
Yeah.
Just a couple on my boat, and that's it.
If you had one last fish to catch, what would it be?
Gosh, tarpon or snook, no doubt.
With a fly rod?
It wouldn't have to be on a fly rod.
Doesn't matter.
It's all about the bite.
How big would that fish have to be?
It wouldn't even have to be a big one. I just like watching them eat. That's my favorite part of a tarpon, is watching him eat.
Right.
The jumps and all that's great, and it's all fun, but I just love watching that mouth open up and eat a fly.
That's when you got them.
That's when you got them.
All their work is complete.
Exactly. The rest of it's real work.
Right. No, I think that's right. It's the figuring out how to make an animal. How do you convince that animal to do what it's not supposed to do?
Yeah.
That's a great challenge for sure.
But hopefully that won't be for a long time.
Yeah.
I still got a lot to
of course. What is the fly designs? I can imagine they're pretty simple because you're fishing with off-color water over here.
Yeah, I'm still, everybody uses synthetics now, and I do use some synthetic stuff. I'm still kind of an old timer. I use a lot of natural materials.
Right.
I use a lot of hackles and furs, and the invention of brushes for tying collars and whatnot are really nice. That makes life a lot easier.
For sure.
But yeah, pretty basic flies.
And it's not hard to get a fish to bite your bug over here, is it?
It's not as hard as it is in Keys. It can be really hard.
Over here it can be.
It can be, absolutely.
If it's cold.
Pressure. I think the fishing pressure on them gets them where they get pretty tough.
I bet some of your old customers are getting pretty angry and agitated now with the same fish they used to catch 30 years ago.
You know, the biggest difference is the laid-up fish. We had a phenomenal laid-up fishery here. The bays, I would say if you put the fly in the right place, 90% of the fish will eat before. Now 90% of them won't. Maybe higher. They get fished every day, most of them. There's places that people aren't fishing them, but most of the spots people know now.
So you get 10 shots at laid up fish in dirty water. 1 or 2 of them going to eat.
That's probably an exaggeration even.
If you're hoping.
Yeah, if I get 25 shots today, all day, laid up fish, we'll probably jump 2 or 3 fish.
Wow.
Do your anglers suck?
No, some of them do. Well, that's what guys sound good. I mean, they just turn, swim away. A lot of times or sink.
And you say you still tie flies with feathers. Is that because you think it works better, or is that your pride?
I think they work better. I want to do whatever works best.
They move in the water better. All those fibers.
Absolutely. I still tie some stuff with synthetics, craft furs and whatnot, but I think that's what at least works for me best.
Yeah.
And we don't tie teeny stuff like you guys do. We do when the water gets really clear later in the season, but I don't think I fish anything less than a 1/0, and that's rare. Most of my stuff 2/0 still. I know you guys get really small down there, but we can get away with it, a little bigger stuff. But I mean, when I first started doing this, we were fishing 4/0, occasionally a 5/0 hook, and
5-inch long flies.
Oh yeah, and I still have some flies that I tie that are 5-6 inches long. They're big black stuff they can see. So it's good when it gets harder. Makes you smarter, makes you work harder at it, and try to find stuff.
Right. Anything else you'd like to talk about?
Oh, I'm just happy. I've loved being a guide. I love living here on Marco. I've been lucky. I've raised 3 great kids. It's afforded me to spend a lot of time home when I wasn't traveling on the Redfish Tour. I'm proud of all 3 of them. My wife's been very tolerant of me doing all this. But it's been a good life. It's been a real good life.
Well, you're a fun guy to fish with, that's for sure.
Well, I appreciate it.
You're a good man.
We need to do more of it.
I need to do more of it. I want Nikki to come over and hang out with us.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I want to see your neck of the woods. I'd love that.
That'd be good. We'll do it for sure.
Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Love having it.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Great to meet you.
Thank you, Bob. Andrew, you're a good man. Thank you. Say hi to Bob for us.
I will do it.
All right, man.
Copers.
Copers. Bob Copers. All right, bud.
What I saw, it's just a ride.